Welcome to the Maximum Mom podcast. I am so excited to welcome Erin Lecocq, who was a Washington lawyer. That is how I knew her, and now she lives in New Mexico. Thanks so much, Erin, for joining me.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you. I love having somebody with your experience in, child welfare and just your experience as a young mom of a little one. I mean, lots of our listeners are kind of in your, age group of dealing with a little one. And so I think it's so important to share your perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what makes you a mom? Like who are you at home with? Tell us about your family.
So I'm a single mom at the moment, and I have a little girl, and she is not so little anymore. She's 9. She's almost 10. And it's just the two of, I have 50-50 custody with her dad right now. So it's just me and her for a week, and then a week to kind of recombobulate a little bit, and then another week with her. And and it's really fun with her right now. Last year was a little bit more challenging with her at home while I was working, but we've kind of gotten back into a better group now. And so,
that's so awesome.
Yeah.
I cannot believe she's almost 10.
I know.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. Time really flies.
Yeah. Yeah, they always are like, it goes fast. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, it goes so fast.
It goes so fast. I mean, I sometimes am stunned actually by how fast it goes. Tell us a little bit about, I would love to hear what was your experience working from home? Were you working from home while you were having her at home last year?
Yes. Yeah. So when the schools shut down in New Mexico and she was home for the very tail end of her second grade year, we were all trying to figure out, I think everyone was in the same boat. We were trying to figure out how to make all of that work. And it didn't, I think she got a lot of TV time because we were trying to figure out how I could work from home. And then over the summer, we kind of got, a little bit more of a, kind of a daily routine down. And then when she started again in the fall, because I had my kind of summer routine down and my working routine, we were able to set up kind of Alexa honestly was kind of my best friend, because Alexa, like, you can program the announcements. So you can say, it's 9:30, it's time for your meeting. And so Alexa would pop in and be like, Madeline, it's time for your meeting. And then she would know, okay, I'm going to get on the computer and go. So if I were in a meeting or something, Alexa would kind of take over the parenting for me, which was
so
really
smart.
nice. Yeah, that was extremely helpful. So, but still, I have transcripts of depositions where her little voice pops in.
Right.
Mom, can I have a popsicle? Yep, because that's where we are now. So that's now on the record, and that's fine.
What can you do? If the head of New Zealand can deal with her child during a national address, I say you get to deal with your child during a deposition.
Right. And that's just warn everybody. And it's not like I was in the same, the only person either, which is, I think, kind of good that actually, I think it was really beneficial. Like, the whole pandemic obviously is really horrible, but one of the silver linings, I think, is that other people who were maybe not the primary caregivers had an opportunity to see what it's like to have to balance the work and the home, with the kid popping in your meetings and asking for popsicles. And, and so I think other attorneys, especially, I don't want to generalize, but especially male attorneys who were maybe never had to deal with that, suddenly are like, what? Like, this kid's popping in the middle of my deposition, and they have to figure out how to balance that. So, no one was negative about it at all, because I think we were mostly all in the same boat. And if anything, I think people were more sympathetic to having a little one popping in and out of the screen.
Well, I think you bring up such an amazing point. And it's one of the things that I think for me coming out of the pandemic, I really am becoming like kind of an evangelist on this. while I absolutely think a lot of people saw what it takes, I'm not convinced that those same people have all leaned in properly to take over their equitable share of that work and invisible work at home.
Yes, yes, I agree. Yeah, I
And
think a lot of people now are like, I'm so glad they're back at school because I don't do that anymore. I'm like, that work doesn't actually go away.
it surely doesn't. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think, and I mean, people who see me on social media know that I am like such a fan of Eve Rodsky's book on fair play and what it can do for a couple and a family, a divorced family, even a single mom. I have to tell you, it's quite helpful. I mean, seeing all the work that goes into life, including child rearing, and looking at this stack of 100 cards, I mean, it's daunting to see what is being done. And I mean, I know and you know that women are doing the bulk of that work in many, many homes. And the economic impact on women is just, I mean, it's wrong on so many levels. And you see the number of women who've come out of the workforce during COVID is striking to me.
Yes.
And that is so concerning to me. And I don't know exactly how to fix it, but I have to tell you, I'm a little bit on a mission about this because as somebody with older children who, I'm kind of past like the phase where you are with a young one, you're figuring out, popsicles, transportation, getting into Zoom school, all those things. I do not even see how you all did it. I mean, I literally think we have this generation of absolute heroes in moms. And I mean, I marvel at all of you. I really do.
Thank you.
Well, we've just got to fix it because it's going to be a burden that's too big to bear. And that's my worry. I mean, I'm really worried about the mental health of a lot of women who I know and just see, or acquaintances, or, just in the world, like in lawyer groups, you'll see these people that are just, I mean, they're exhausted.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think I read an article today saying, it's okay to be exhausted. And I'm like, I know it's okay, but like, what are we going to actually do about it? Because it may be okay, but it's not sustainable.
It's not. I mean, and it shouldn't be sustainable. Right. Like, I mean, are we really bringing our best selves to anything, to parenting, to our work, to our hobbies? I mean, do people even have hobbies? Because do you know?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's something actually, Eve is written a book. I don't know the exact title, but it's about unicorn spaces, and it's about hobbies and, finding time for those creative outlets. And I think it's coming out in December. And I really look forward to that because I mean, I think the things that we give up in this quest to do our 100 cards, while many partners are, on the golf course for 4 hours or hunting for a weekend or
or
fishing
their alone time
all day. I mean, I think we've got to recalibrate this and make it make sense. And I mean, my hope is to bring enough men in to talk about it and to understand how their lives would be so much better if their partners, their spouses, their wives, whatever, were happy and actually joyful rather than seething with rage and resentment.
Yes. Yeah.
But we'll see. Well, tell us a little bit about, I want to talk about your work when you were here in Washington. I mean, you did a lot of work with children and, just dealing with dependency. I mean, tell us about your work here in Washington and what you did and really how that has shaped what you're doing in your career.
Okay. When I first started, so I'm in law school, so I've only been a practicing lawyer for a little over 5 years now. And at the very tail end of law school, we took a clinic to help incarcerated parents, and that really stood out to me because I think at that point my daughter was 7 weeks old when I started law school, and so I think it changed everything when I was going through school and kind of looking at everything through a lens of a parent. And I never thought of being a parent who's incarcerated. For whatever reason, that just never crossed my mind. And so that clinic name really stood out to me. And that was when I was introduced to the dependency child welfare system, particularly, as it relates to incarcerated parents. And so we were given our very first case in that clinic, representing a woman as she was going through her criminal trial with her children, and then how, trying to see if we could work with, in conjunction with the criminal side to help her have a better chance of keeping her children through the whole process. And so that was, learning all of that law and all of that. It was just, I liken it to, being kind of like my whole life I've been in this boat on the ocean. And it was the first time ever that I was under the water looking to see what people actually have to deal, like a lot of people have to deal with, and how they function. And I think the idea that, the state can come and terminate your parental rights was a brand new idea that I'd never heard of, and it was horrifying. And I thought, this is the worst thing I've ever heard of. And I want to, work as hard as I can to try to help a lot of these, as many people as I can that are in the system. And so after we graduated from law school, a friend and I started a firm specifically so that we could get a contract with the Office of Public Defense in Washington, representing parents in the child welfare system, so we could keep going. So we started with 8 cases between the two of us. And I think by the time I left the firm, we had, I don't know, 140 maybe. We grew really fast. And it was a lot. It was very fast. It was a very steep learning curve that was a little bit, I guess I'm glad that it moved so quickly, and that we were so busy all the time, because I think it didn't give me a chance to kind of sit with a lot of this stuff and really let it kind of permeate, because I think that would have been much harder. And then during that time, I went through my own divorce. And so that kind of, my experience going through my own divorce and the experience that a lot of my clients were having were kind of parallel, like fighting, for the rights to see your children and trying to overcome these barriers that are put in place specifically for women, to have your children, to have this like basic fundamental right that nobody really, people think is just impermeable, and it is not. It is fragile. And I think that was just it was just that fragility was underscored for me, both in my own divorce and in the work that I was doing.
Yeah, well, actually, I think of it as, I think of women's rights with regard to their children as Swiss cheese. There are some serious holes in the cheese. And it is stark sometimes. How things happen. And especially in dependency, you just see so many things where, the chicken and the egg, like, the person doesn't have a car, they can't afford a car because they're making sure that the family has food, a roof over their head, and whatever. Then their children are taken away. They can't get to their services because they don't have the car, and they're going to lose their job if they spend all their time on their bus. It's this.
Right.
Absolute,
and then they're penalized because they don't have a job to support their kids, so they can't get them back. So
it's such a circuitous, I have found it to be wildly frustrating at times. To watch the runaround and the thought of when you see the services that people are expected to do, and then you get down into the down and dirty of what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. It is a full-time job.
Yes.
And put in some Seattle traffic, some, public transportation issues, appointments getting canceled. Your kid getting sick, and a little homeschooling during COVID.
Right.
It's just, it's been pretty wild to see. Well, how do you feel like your work with children in that system has prepared you for the work you're doing now in New Mexico, working in the Attorney General's office, though on the civil side of things?
I think my public defender is always there. It always,
Right.
it creeps up a lot. I think, the state has an immense amount of power, and I really see that, and I think it's very important that we, as state, um, as the state, so to clarify, because I don't want anyone to think that I'm now on the other side. I do not work for CYFD in any way, and I couldn't do it. But so just in just general, state kind of civil litigation, one of the things we do is administrative prosecutions of professional licenses.
Mhm.
And I think seeing the power of, it's not anywhere near, the child welfare system, but the state has the ability to remove somebody's, professional license and say, you don't have your, you were a psychologist and you're not anymore, or at least you can't practice here in New Mexico. And they have to have such a good reason for it. And I get really frustrated if I see people trying to kind of go through the motions without actually doing it, because that's what frustrated me so much when I was on the other side, is like, you are the state and you have an obligation to do X, Y, and Z, and you need to do it right, and you have to follow your own policies, and you cannot, cut corners, because
Right.
this is somebody's livelihood. And I think oftentimes my colleagues will be like, Erin, and I'm like, no, we are the state and we do it right. And if we lose, then we lose. Like, it's not,
Exactly.
and I think that's, it's nowhere near the level of kind of permanency as it used to be. But I think that has certainly, I think that the people who work within the state organizations like that really just have to remember that they have so much power, and it is such a responsibility to make sure that they follow the procedures that are in place, even though the child welfare system is the worst thing ever. Like,
Could
I
not
think our
agree
lives
more.
as defense attorneys would have been a lot easier if they would just follow their own policies, first of all. And
Well, you got to read them, girl. I mean,
then,
you got to know they exist. I used to love going to an FTDM, and I'm like, now what about this thing right here that y'all wrote? Like, this little thing that, and
yeah,
it's like, oh,
yeah,
details, Elise. I
right.
mean,
You don't have
it's
to.
minor details.
Yeah, yeah. And then, I have women. I have two. There are two prosecutions that kind of come to mind. One is from a psychologist who is running a pill mill, and I see in his victims essentially my former clients. And I'm like, it's one thing that you're just making money off these people, but you don't even think about the collateral consequences of what it is you're doing, about the parents who are losing children because you have them hooked on Xanax, you trying to help them, but they're not. Like, you are, have leave this destruction in your wake, and you don't care because you're just making $175 off every prescription you sell.
Right.
And then another psychologist who was supposed to be working with women who are, justice involved women coming out of prison, trying to get a leg up, and then he's sexually assaulting them. And I'm like, what? Like, you don't even know the harm that you are doing, not just to these women, but to their families and their children and their whole system. Like, they're, struggling, trying to get themselves back and their children back. And like, I don't know. So I think it
Oh,
has made me much more empathetic just across the board, even though I'm not
absolutely.
actually doing that work anymore.
Well, and it's interesting. I just love how you bring up the state and the power they have. I mean, and my mom, rest in peace, if she could hear me now discussing these things on a podcast, she'd be like, Elise, did I not teach you there's certain things we don't talk about? I mean, the death penalty, when I was in law school, I was super interested in the death penalty work and constitutional law around the death penalty, and worked with the Death Penalty Resource Center. And I have always felt so strongly that, I mean, without regard to all the, morality issues around the death penalty or things like that, the inequity in the power between the state's
Yeah.
prosecution and what is available to the defense, both in oftentimes experience of the attorney who's
Mhm.
possibly being appointed and never touched like a felony, much less a murder, much less a death penalty case, but they don't have the resources to hire experts and do the things that need to be done to get a trial ready. And to me, like any verdict that came out of this inequitable system is so contrary to our democracy. Like I struggle so much with the inequity between the state and the defense as far as the purse strings behind it.
Yeah.
And I just, it makes no sense to me how it can seem fair. I mean, and I don't care. I mean, even if the defense, turns out they're 100% guilty, like the process has to be even, it has to be evenly staffed, evenly funded for our system to at all pretend to work.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that I often, I mean, just independency was just always like, could we maybe put some of the money that we're giving the foster parents to the biological parents?
Right.
I mean, I was always kind of like, could we look at the economics of this, please?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it was always a struggle. Well, I mean, I know you have to, I mean, I would assume like me, I mean, it's kind of traumatic sometimes to work in a practice area where you do see, I think, a lot of inequity, a lot of, I mean, real hard struggle. I mean, how have you through the years dealt with, I mean, I hate to sound melodramatic, but I mean, vicarious trauma really from the work that you've done?
I'm going to try not to cry in this part of the story. That's why I can't do it right now. I had to take a step back because my cup was empty and I didn't have anything to give back. But that was the very last trial I did in Washington. And it was the end. Like I couldn't, it just kind of broke everything that was left in me because of this inequity piece. And really, really briefly, it was a mom who had four kids, full siblings, one mom, one dad, 4 kids, 2 babies who were in foster care. And we all know, those of us that do this work, babies are super cute and adoptable and, super easy. And then 2 older kids, 8 and 10, when it started, and like 10 and 13, 2 or 3 years had passed by the time it was done. So 10 and 13 when it was done. And they were with, actually, after a lot of work, they ended up with a family member in a different state. And we had tried that. The youngest baby was born during this process. So we had the 3 on an ICPC to try to get them all out of state with this family member who was a therapeutic foster parent. So like, who was totally capable of taking care of all of them. And then the department dropped that youngest kid, like, whoops, we didn't put him on the ICPC, sorry, but it's been approved for the other 2 kids and they're going and we're done. We're not going to talk about it anymore. And then they filed for termination on the younger 2. And so the termination trial was just on the younger 2. And so we tried to get the brothers to intervene with, the idea that like, okay, maybe the parents are not where they need to be, but like, you cannot separate these boys. Like, what have these older boys done to deserve losing their brothers? Like, it's just appalling to me that we even had to have this discussion when we had a family member willing to take all 4 of them. The parents were willing to relinquish all 4 as long as they stayed together and were with this family member. And I couldn't believe the number of hoops we had to go through to try to get it. The foster parents came into court at one point. I had filed a motion for a visit with them. And they said, if you grant this motion, we will not take the kids back. And I was like, you cannot let the foster parents hold the court hostage like this. Clearly, this isn't a good position for them. This isn't a good placement for them. And of course, the court's like, well, I can't disrupt the placement. And I'm like, you are letting them. Like, this is just, I felt like I was, taking crazy pills.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then the trial, I had an expert there to talk about, sibling bonds and sibling relationships and how vital that is, especially for children of color who are, need to have the sibling relationship, but also that cultural relationship. And how, and the court wouldn't let her testify. It was irrelevant. And I'm like,
this did not end, did it, with 2 kids going?
The very last thing I did, so I knew we were going to lose the trial.
Oh
it was my Hail Mary, like, last thing I did, we got a new judge in
good.
the dependency court, and you may know who I'm talking about. She was lovely. And I was like, if anyone is going to grant a motion to change placement without anything else, like a Hail Mary pass, it's going to be her. And so I filed it, and I left. And like she ordered the department to do the ICPC for the babies, which they did very begrudgingly, and it took forever. And finally, she kept doing check-ins. So this motion was pending for like a year and a half. Finally, she was like, I have to do that. Like, I have to grant it. I have to move them because these brothers have to stay together, because that is what the law says. The law says you keep the families together. And even though the rights have been terminated for the parents, we were like, you cannot separate these boys. Like, that's just the worst thing I can possibly think of. And so that was the like happy ending of this, is at least they're together. And then even though we appealed the termination, on the basis of the unbelievable trial that I had to do, and the unbelievable amount of evidence that I was not allowed to present, even that, and the Court of Appeals sadly affirmed the termination, in a published opinion. So that's awesome. I think we need stronger sibling laws in Washington. That's certainly something that, has come out of that. But it was just like the end of all of that. I was like, I cannot do this anymore.
Right.
Like, I have to take a step back, because the unbelievable injustice that happened in that case to those parents, to those kids, and I wasn't a huge fan of the foster parents, but even to the foster parents, they were, somebody said you can adopt these babies. They were planning on that. They lost them, like trauma all around, because the department didn't do what it was supposed to do initially. And then now, now they're terminating on the older ones, and they're like, well, why doesn't she said in 2018 she'd relinquish to all four. Why would she fight this now? And I'm like, if you had done this in 2018 when she had said it, we would have avoided all of this, and we'd be exactly where you want them to be today. Like, how funny it is that you're like, this is the best placement for all of them. Let's keep the brothers together. And I'm like, I can't, like, I want to fight you just on principle.
I do. I'm kind of speechless and stunned. I can't imagine the trauma and emotional just burden that was for you. I mean, I'm really sorry you went through that, seriously, trauma all around.
Yeah.
And when you put that in the mix with trying to parent, trying to co-parent, trying to work, move to another state, get another job. And do your 100 cards of things, your invisible labor. It's no wonder your cup was completely empty. It not only was empty, it had a big hole in it,
Yeah.
We've got to do better, and figuring out how to do better. The systems are so broken, for that to be possible is kind of stunning, actually.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. It takes the toll. Like, those of us that love the work and really wanted to do the work, going through my divorce, where I was having, they weren't judges, but people in authority say, like, you're not doing as good of a job as you should be as a mom, and therefore, like, I don't know about you having, custody of your child. When I'm like, all I do is try to save families and keep them together. And like, I have to, like, it's just massively unfair, like, across the board.
Well, the choices that we face are just, they're not choices. And when people tell me, well, women are choosing to leave the workforce, I'm like, they're choosing to leave the workforce over maybe not, doing something drastic to themselves because of their severe mental health problems that have been made horrendous by what has gone on. I think the pandemic has brought this invisible workload to the forefront, and even in our professional lives. You just have the most perfect example. Even in your professional life as an attorney, they're doing that work. You are caregiving.
Yes.
And It is. I mean, and I know, I mean, so well, having done the exact same work as you in this arena. I mean, it is pretty, I mean, it is just heart-wrenching at times.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's just that injustice just kind of across the board, that those in power use that power to punish women or, families who don't kind of comport with the idea of, this is what a normal family is supposed to look like. And it just feels horrifically punitive across the board.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Um, I mean, I'm so glad your story had a happy ending.
Me
Because
too.
that was going to be really, really sad.
That was yeah. I
I
remember
mean,
watching that hearing on Zoom and just sobbing. Like
oh
I it
yeah.
just like this huge amount of relief. Just like
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I mean, the impact that you had and your firm had, I mean, on those siblings, it's life changing, for these kids to be able to grow up and know each other and learn from each other and, have that relationship. I mean, the social science tells us the sibling relationship is the most important one.
Yes.
I mean, it's the
It's
longest
the
for
longest.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And for children, especially with those age differentials, I mean, those older children will play a huge mentoring type role, likely with the younger children.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be really powerful. And I can't imagine the trauma of the older children thinking that these babies would be adopted away. I mean, the whole thing, I'm going to try to let go of that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Erin, I cannot tell you. I mean, I really can't tell you how much I appreciate you being willing to talk to me. And I mean, and to really be vulnerable about, how hard that work is and how hard it was. I mean, for you to really have to kind of make a conscious decision to step back, and who knows what your life will hold, obviously. But I mean, to give yourself that space to fix your cup,
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
put some putty in the hole at least and get it where it can get all filled up again. I mean, what are you doing now to fill your cup? Do you have things you're doing, like either hobbies? I don't know, maybe some of the, I think of like the Ariana Huffington, like Thrive, things, getting better sleep, or tell
Yeah.
us, what are you doing to help this?
Yeah. I think it's spending a lot of time with my daughter, like really good
Yeah.
quality time to
Yeah.
kind of heal both of us. I
Mhm.
think those years with the work I was like the really hard work
Yeah.
I was doing, plus the end of the divorce, plus we had to move, we had to leave Washington as a result of the divorce, and all of that just requires an immense amount of healing. And so we eat a lot of cheesecake, and I don't care. And we,
I think
you know,
cheesecake is like a health food for sure. I mean, it's like carrot cake. In my mind, that's a vegetable. So I'm good with
yeah,
it.
yeah. And we just, like, we just spend as much when I have her. She is my number one
Right.
focus, and I try really hard to, be like, it's you and me, and we're gonna get through this together. And just to I just feel like us being together and traveling together and just spending huge amounts of time together um, before she hits the teenage years and doesn't want to
Right.
anymore um, is very healing
Absolutely.
but like it fills up my cup again. I think it's healing for her. I think it
Right.
kind of is just it's a really good recovery. Like I feel like we've run like massive marathons and we just need to like
Totally.
sit and recover for a while.
That's
And it's been
awesome.
we've been in New Mexico now for 2.5 years. And so it's been a while and things are like, I finally feel like I'm getting good night's sleep. Finally.
Oh,
Like, and we sleep, a lot and
right.
we, take lots of walks and try to exercise and just finally, actually, that's the first thing. I have never been super active just because there wasn't time,
Right.
and so now, I've made it a goal to run a 5K last year, and I made it a goal to run a 10K this year. And then she's been running, she's in a running club at school, so like we'll run together, and that seems so we're getting healthier and stronger together, which I think
That
is
is
our recovery.
awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that you're running together. I found running to be so healing when
Mhm.
I was dealing with my own divorce stuff. I used to love to run. And I mean, I could run for hours and I loved it. I was like, I'm going on a 3-hour run. And I thought I was the strongest human on the planet to be
It
able to
is,
run that long.
yes, it's amazing how
It
strong you feel during that. Yeah.
I know. Well, I really, really appreciate your time. And I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to watch your journey from afar. I love
Yeah.
seeing what you're doing there in New Mexico and seeing things with you and your daughter. I just think it's amazing.
Thank you.
And the dependency world here in Washington misses you, but we are very happy that you are doing awesome where you are. And
Thank you.
so I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a great week. And thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Elise. It was a real pleasure.
Absolutely. Bye, Erin.
Bye.